What happens when an 85-year-old woman meets the most controversial figure in modern American politics? Well, for Susan Jones, what happened next was nothing short of shocking. Her life would never be the same again. You'll want to hear this story. At 85 years old, Susan Jones had lived a full life. She had experienced everything from the sweeping changes of the 20th century to the personal triumphs and tragedies that come with age. But nothing could have prepared her for the day her path crossed with President Donald Trump. You're probably wondering, how did a woman like Susan end up in such a situation? It all started with an invitation she never expected. One moment, she was just a regular senior, enjoying the peace of her quiet life, when suddenly, she found herself standing face to face with the man who had shaken up the world. Imagine this. You've lived 85 years, you've seen it all, and you think you've experienced the highs and lows of life. Then, out of nowhere, you get invited to meet a person you've only seen on TV. Someone whose very presence seems to command a reaction from everyone. Some love him, others despise him. But how would someone like Susan react? Let's take a step back. Before the invitation came, Susan had always been a quiet observer of the political world. She didn't pick sides easily. But when she received that unexpected call inviting her to meet Donald Trump while he was still president, she had no idea what kind of impact that encounter would have on her. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Susan's phone rang. She had been sitting in her cozy living room, knitting a scarf for her granddaughter, when the call came in. It was a number she didn't recognize. Normally, she would have let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. Hello? Hi, is this Susan Jones? A voice on the other end asked. Yes, this is she. Who's calling? This is Redacted. I work with the White House communications team, and I'm calling to extend a personal invitation to you. Susan froze. She thought it was a prank at first. How could anyone from the White House be calling her? But the voice continued, explaining that the president wanted to meet her due to her background, her advocacy work for senior citizens, and her deep involvement in her community. This wasn't a mistake. This was real. Susan didn't know how to react. She had spent her life advocating for those in her age group, fighting for the rights of seniors, and working to make life a little easier for those who needed it most. But a meeting with Donald Trump, the man who had polarized the country in so many ways? After a moment of stunned silence, she accepted. But even as she said yes, she had no idea what to expect. She had no idea what this meeting would do to her life. A few weeks later, Susan found herself standing in the White House, surrounded by the kind of luxury she had only seen in magazines. The opulent decor, the security, the hustle and bustle of staff working around the clock. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But there was something else too. The air was thick with anticipation. When she was ushered into the Oval Office, her heart raced. She had heard so much about Donald Trump, but here he was, standing right in front of her. It was surreal. He looked just as he did on TV, powerful, commanding, yet oddly approachable. He smiled when she walked in. Mrs. Jones, it's a pleasure to meet you, Trump said, extending his hand. She shook it, unsure of what to say next. But the meeting quickly took an unexpected turn. As they sat down to talk, Susan expected a typical political conversation, maybe some small talk about her work or the country. Instead, Trump went straight to the heart of the matter. He asked Susan questions that left her speechless at first. What do you think is the biggest issue facing seniors today? He asked, his voice serious. What do we need to do to make America better for the elderly? Susan was taken aback. The president, the leader of the free world, wanted her opinion? She thought for a moment before answering, but before she could finish, Trump interrupted her. You know, he said, his tone becoming more animated. I've always said that the elderly are overlooked. People forget that they have a voice. That's something I admire about you, Susan. You've made sure that voice is heard. Susan sat in stunned silence. She had spent decades working in advocacy, but this was different. She wasn't just talking to a politician. She was speaking to a man who, for all his faults, was listening. But then, Trump did something that left Susan utterly shocked. He asked her if she would consider becoming a special advisor on senior issues. He told her he wanted someone like her in the White House, helping to shape policy for the elderly. Susan couldn't believe what she was hearing. Here she was, an 85-year-old woman, being offered a position in the highest office in the land. The idea seemed absurd, almost impossible. But there it was, right in front of her. She had been offered a chance to make a real difference on a national scale. Susan left the meeting feeling overwhelmed. She didn't know what to do with the offer. On one hand, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to effect real change. On the other, she wasn't sure if she was ready to dive into the political world so late in life. But the decision wasn't as simple as she thought. Her phone rang again a few days later, this time with a voice she didn't recognize. It was someone from the White House again, asking if she had made her decision. After much contemplation, Susan turned down the offer. She felt that at 85, her life had already been dedicated to helping others, and the chaos of Washington politics wasn't the path she wanted to follow at this point in her life. But the meeting with Trump left a lasting mark on her. You see, that one encounter changed Susan forever. It made her realize that, no matter your age, you can still make an impact. You can still be a voice in the room, whether it's in the White House or in your local community. And, most importantly, you don't need to be a politician to be heard. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in Susan's shoes? Would you have taken the opportunity to advise the president, or would you have turned it down? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to know. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this story, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new video. Hit the notification bell, too, so you stay updated with all our latest content. As Susan continued her life after that meeting, she realized that the encounter wasn't just about politics or the power of influence. It was about the power of being seen. It was about a woman, in her 80s, being recognized for her work and the difference she made for others. It was about showing that no matter how old you are, your voice still matters. But Susan's journey didn't end there. In the months that followed, she found herself reflecting on what she could do with the platform she had been given. Although she didn't take the White House position, Susan began to speak at conferences, sharing her story, inspiring others, and advocating for senior citizens across the nation. And what's even more fascinating is that after meeting Donald Trump, Susan found herself involved in more ways than ever before, just not in the way anyone expected. She started to see a different side of the political world, one she never would have encountered had she not taken that first step. Susan's story is a powerful reminder that age doesn't define your ability to make an impact. It's a reminder that sometimes, the most unexpected moments can change your life forever. It's a reminder that the world is always listening, whether it's the president or someone in your community. So, what will you do with the opportunity that's in front of you? Let Susan's story inspire you. No matter where you are in life, it's never too late to be heard. And once again, if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Click the notification bell so you don't miss any of our exciting stories. Thank you for watching. After the meeting, life for Susan Jones didn't slow down. In fact, it did the opposite. The invitation to the White House and the subsequent offer to work with the president stirred something deep inside her, a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. At 85, she had always been content with the quiet routine of her life, but this moment felt different. It wasn't just about politics. It wasn't even just about Donald Trump. It was about the realization that she could still influence change, even at her age. What followed was unexpected. The story of her meeting with the president spread through the community like wildfire. People were curious. People were inspired. And some, to be honest, were a bit skeptical. After all, Susan had been just another voice in a sea of elderly activists. But after she had stood in front of the most powerful man in the country, the narrative around her began to change. Local newspapers, then regional outlets, began covering her story. She was invited to speak at conferences about the rights and treatment of seniors in America, and soon, she found herself giving talks to people who had once only seen her as a neighbor, a kind, older woman who always had a story to share. But what was most striking wasn't the newfound attention. It was the way Susan started to view her own life. Susan had always been a quiet advocate. She didn't seek fame, didn't chase recognition, and never thought of herself as anything other than an ordinary person trying to make a difference. But after meeting Trump, something shifted. She realized that, even without a big title, she could still make waves. She started thinking about how many people, especially in her generation, feel invisible. After all, how many older people do you know who feel like they've been left behind by a world obsessed with youth and progress? Susan was determined to be the voice for them. But this wasn't just about policy, it was about human connection. Susan's talks were filled with real stories, stories of families who had to fight for health care for their elderly members, of people living in underfunded senior homes, of the hidden struggles faced by those who had built the country and now felt forgotten. The thing about Susan was that her words weren't just about the facts. They weren't just about the statistics you see in a textbook. No, Susan spoke with the kind of wisdom that comes from living through decades of change. Her voice was soothing but strong, a mixture of compassion and resolve that no one could ignore. People started listening. Now, I want to ask you, can you relate to that feeling of being overlooked? Of having your voice ignored because of your age, your background, or your position in life? How many of you have felt that your impact didn't matter? But like Susan, you can still be heard. You can still make a difference. It doesn't matter where you are in life. It's never too late to change something, to inspire someone, or to leave a legacy. Susan's journey had only just begun. As her platform grew, so did the challenges. She was invited to speak not just about senior issues, but about the broader scope of aging and how society treated its elderly population. But this new visibility also meant scrutiny. People began to question her, not just about her political leanings, but about her role in the larger conversation. Was she being used by the system? Was she merely a pawn in a political game? But Susan, as always, remained focused. She was careful to never let politics cloud her mission. It wasn't about the president. It wasn't about the parties. It was about the people, about making sure the elderly had the resources, care, and respect they deserved. And you know what? This focus paid off. Susan became a voice for something far bigger than herself. She was now advocating for the elderly at a level she had never imagined. Local organizations reached out for her advice, and soon, she was consulting for government programs designed to improve the lives of senior citizens. But here's the catch. Susan didn't want anyone to think she was doing it for her own gain. She wanted to ensure the real issues were being addressed. The problems that people like her, like you, face every day. One of the most striking changes Susan experienced after her meeting with Trump wasn't just the external recognition, but the transformation within herself. She began to embrace the confidence that had eluded her for so long. For years, she had played it safe, blending into the background. But now, she was front and center. And with that came a deep understanding. Age doesn't define your value. She looked at her life differently now. When she first turned 85, Susan had wondered how much longer she had left. But meeting Donald Trump and the events that followed gave her a sense of purpose she never thought possible. Suddenly, the years ahead weren't just about slowing down. They were about continuing to make an impact. Susan realized something we can all learn from. It's never about how many years you have left, but about how you spend them. You don't have to be young to make a difference. You don't have to be in the spotlight to be valuable. You don't need to be anyone other than yourself to change the world around you. And I ask you, have you thought about what you want your legacy to be? It doesn't matter how old you are, where you come from, or what you've accomplished so far. Every single one of us has the ability to make a lasting impact. As the months passed, Susan continued to speak out, her influence spreading beyond her wildest dreams. Her words resonated with young and old alike. In her speeches, she spoke not just about policy, but about the shared experiences that connect all generations. How the struggles of today's elderly are the struggles of tomorrow's young. It wasn't long before more seniors began to reach out to Susan, sharing their own stories. Some were heartwarming, some heartbreaking. She found herself listening to stories of loneliness, financial struggles, and the painful reality of how many elderly people felt abandoned by society. But she also heard about hope, about people who had been able to make small, but significant changes in their lives, people who were fighting for what they believed in, people who, like Susan, were determined to keep going. And this is where Susan's story takes a turn, a deeper turn. It wasn't just about political influence anymore. It wasn't just about receiving recognition from powerful figures. It was about the impact she had on individuals, on real lives. Susan's phone was flooded with calls from senior citizens and their families who needed help navigating the complex healthcare system. She became a sort of lifeline, guiding them through the red tape and advocating for them where she could. What Susan had discovered was this: the real power wasn't in meetings with politicians or standing on grand stages. It was in the quiet moments of connection. It was in giving someone a voice when they felt like they didn't have one. If you're inspired by Susan's story, I want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel right now. You don't want to miss out on future stories that will inspire you, change your perspective, and remind you of the incredible impact you can make, no matter your age. And don't forget to hit that notification bell, so you're the first to know when we release new videos that might just change your life. As Susan sat back in her rocking chair one evening, looking out at the sunset, she realized how far she had come. That meeting with Donald Trump, that unexpected twist of fate, had altered the course of her life. It had shown her that even at 85, her voice mattered. It had shown her that age wasn't a limitation. It was a privilege. And most importantly, it had shown her that her time was far from over. But now, with all that she had learned, Susan was more determined than ever. She would continue to fight for the rights of the elderly. She would continue to inspire others to speak up. And she would continue to live her life with purpose. And what about you? What will you do with your time? Are you ready to take that first step toward making a change? It's never too late to make an impact, and like Susan, you can start today. Thanks for watching. See you in another inspiring stories.